And even for small company, you have a similar thing. So that leads to one of the other questions that is the topic, which is around the stakeholders, the alignment, the juggling things, and the trade-offs. So would love to hear a little bit. Obviously, every company faces that. And then how does your team manage it, and how you keep people aligned?
So that's a lot of questions. So maybe we can start with, let's start with trade-offs and resourcing, and then we can talk maybe about alignment. Or do we want to do alignment first? I'm happy to do whichever.
Whatever naturally flow.
Okay, so maybe we could, so let me talk a little bit about managing, with the resources that we have, and how do you sort of do these trade-offs. So it again goes back to KPIs and KPIs that drive the business. So essentially investment, at least the way we approach it, is it's based on ROI for every initiative, whether it's what we call a voice of customer feature that's benefiting an existing customer, or a voice of prospect feature that's going to help us gain a new customer. We need to have a pretty clear understanding of what the impact is going to be, and then balancing that against what we think, at least at a high level, what the cost of building out that product or feature is going to look like. And the key here is, we typically, the metrics that we use is, for example, it's either new MRR, monthly recurring revenue, or retained MRR. So how much revenue is going to get retained if we retain a specific segment of customers. We typically don't do one-offs. We try to do, because it's very easy, especially in B2B SaaS, and as you start getting into B to large B, where you're getting dragged into sort of, hey, there's one feature that needs to be done. There are bug fixes that we need to address. That's a different story. But when it comes to features, we typically want to look at chunks of investment based on, again, as I said, retained revenue or new MRR. And the key here is, again, and a very interesting quote years ago when I was at PayPal, I attended a course, and one of the instructors said, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. So because opinions are great, but when we're building scaling products, it's more about what needs to happen for groups of customers, large segments of customers. So, and that helps us get to data-driven decision-making, and then helps us assign and allocate resources as needed. Part two, limited resources. I think that's there's no one here that could, if everyone could get their entire roadmap down, I think there's something wrong, or clearly there's an idiosyncrasy there. But essentially, when it comes to limited resources, which is a reality for all small startups, it's about categorizing and allocating investment. And the way we approach it is we allocate based on certain kind of, they have 4 key buckets. So we look at it in terms of new features, and that's what I talked about, whether it's a voice of customer, a voice of prospect, or innovation. Then we have another bucket called, system reliability, which is making sure that, this is primarily things like, bug fixes and making sure that things are on track. And then there's infrastructure, and then professional services. And those buckets can vary depending on the type of company. But ultimately, the key is to be able to figure out the allocation breakdown based on stage of growth. So, and typically it biases more towards reliability and infrastructure and even professional services as the company matures. And it's less, and it's more towards, new feature investment when we're still kind of establishing product market fit. And then the other part of it is staying disciplined with it. So being disciplined about resource allocation and doing periodic look backs, and we do this on a quarterly basis, and reallocate based on investment performance. I know I sound like an investment manager at JP Morgan, but it's actually true. I hate to sound like that being a product manager, but that's very important because, and that's where tools like Dragonboat are very helpful, because you can do a look back and sort of say, well, I invested, this much here. This is kind of what the product adoption looked like. This is what the revenue looked like. And does this make sense? Do we need to invest further? And the periodicity, or how quickly and how often you look back, depends on, again, maturity of the company. Sometimes you need to look back once a quarter, sometimes it's once every 2 sprints, sometimes even once every sprint, depending how back you're,
Yeah, I think you touched on so many things where, thinking about, like, first of all, think about resource and scarcity. It's true, no company when we grow up professionally at PayPal, we get a couple hundred engineers, thousands of engineers. We never had enough resource. It's never enough, right? And I think the portfolio approach, it makes so much sense, because there's an impossible to sift through hundreds of product ideas and features, and then even try to, how can you score things based on what? It's just like all these like a very interesting things of how, like, if we want to say product management is to drive outcome, and for you to drive outcome, which is not one, right? It's multiples, it's like a retention or revenue, and all these are different. They are all important. It just have a different level of importance at a different time. So if you don't take a portfolio management approach to it, it's just not, it is investment. Product managers are like investment bankers, right? You basically say, I am deciding what our engineers to be working on, and their time is and their talent is one of the most valuable assets of the company, right? So we are indeed making investment decisions. That you're working on these things, that's the investment decision, right? That's the things that we put it into it, and then the things coming out of it is leading to that. I'm glad you not glad. I think savvy product leaders definitely have to take this approach. And you kind of touched upon a little bit of Dragonboat. Actually, there's a question from the audience that why did you choose Dragonboat over roadmap tools? So would love to hear a little bit more. How you were thinking when you started to. Actually, I don't think even like someone else came to us and I realized, oh, actually it's you, it's your company. So it's an interesting story to learn even for me.